So just jumping right in, let's start with you, Brian. You released a report recently where you've talked about privacy preserving AI technologies. And you say that these technologies, despite that relatively benign sounding name, are the new face of worker surveillance. When I read the report, I was definitely, my eyes were opened and I was, definitely learning a lot. So I would love if you could share a little bit with our audience about what these technologies are and why it's important for us to understand them.
Yeah, thanks, Tim. So my co-authors and I use this phrase, privacy preserving AI technologies, sort of a mouthful, but we're essentially referring to a bunch of related things in our report. We're in the report, we call out federated learning, synthetic data, and differential privacy techniques. And we situate these three examples, and they're just examples. This isn't the be all end all, but we situate these three examples as this emerging layer of computational techniques that allows deployers to derive algorithmic and machine learning insights without actually seeing the data itself. So the metaphor would be something like an impressionistic painting. Like if you stand back at a distance, you can sort of make out a painting. It's like a field, it's like a bunch of flowers. But then if you like kind of like get closer and you look, you can't exactly see the specific like things of color or like the points or the dots. Um, it's just a metaphor. I'm not an art historian. Don't at me. But these emerging technologies, they sort of like credibly offer privacy in ways that, on the surface comply with data protection laws. And in a sense, that's like pretty welcome. Like that's individual privacy and the protection of that is not nothing. The flip side of that is that companies sort of get to have it both ways. So they get to say that they are respecting workers' privacy. They're not looking at your personal data, while they still get the thing that they actually care about. They still get the sort of like algorithmic insights that can be used to manage and control and discipline workers. And so one of the things that we really call out in our report is that, and I'll just highlight it here for folks who are, this is a set of people who are interested in raising job quality standards, enhancing worker power. I think we ought to be just very aware and cautious about what privacy as a framework offers as far as worker protections, and what it does not.
Yeah, so speaking of which, what are the implications for this new kind of technology for policy and for organizing?
Well, I mean, I think we ought to think about surveillance as a political project and not a technical one. So we point out these technologies not because they're the worst offenders and policymakers need to focus on these three things. They matter because they sort of exemplify how chasing data, chasing the newest technologies is ultimately a losing proposition. If the ultimate business model of many companies is to automate and reduce labor costs and exercise control over their workforce, there's always going to be endless ways for companies to innovate ways to do that. And so rather than focus on the individual data privacy, it's much more important, we would argue, to focus on power itself. One example of that we have in our report is we talk about eliminating the employer's surveillance prerogative. So rather than managing technicalities of how worker data is used, it's better to place bright line rules on the collection of that data in the first place. The starting position for worker protections should be a ban on surveillance rather than, and the compromise should be data minimization that captures the least amount of data as necessary. The guiding principle, I think, here, one of them is that once something becomes data in the first place, it's very difficult to get it back, right? The genie's out of the bottle.